NRJ's podcast is brought to you by NRJMediaGroup. Rich,
Yes.
I feel like we just scratched the surface with Juan Cabrera.
We certainly did. And seriously, this guy is a tech genius. And we barely got through half, and I mean half, of what we wanted to ask him.
And let's not forget, he's originally from Spain and has built an incredible career working on some of the biggest productions in Hollywood. That's a huge deal.
It really is. And his journey from Spain to leading VFX teams on massive films and TV shows is just incredible. And this episode is definitely one for the tech obsessed.
Mm-hmm. He broke down how cutting-edge technology is shaping the future of entertainment. And honestly, my mind is still spinning from all those insights, but we like that nerdy stuff. Well, especially you.
And, you're not far behind me. And, let's talk about that crazy tech behind some of our favorite films. Juan has worked on some of the biggest projects out there, and he gave us a rare peek behind the scenes.
Yeah, and we ran out of time.
I know.
There's still so much more to cover. So, Juan, if you're listening, we need a part 2.
Yes, we do. So if you're into VFX, innovation, or just want to know where entertainment tech is headed next, you're in for a treat.
Let's dive in.
Let's do it.
So today, we are very honored to have in Juan Cabrera, who is a well-known legendary colorist for the film industry. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Yes,
My pleasure.
It's nice. It's our pleasure having you here. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, because since I saw your podcast, I was very surprised that when Norma contacted me, and then I didn't know about the podcast, I started seeing the kind of people that you have here, and I was like, what am I gonna do there? You have had the most amazing people here. So
Listen,
thank you so much.
we've been very blessed with the people
Yes.
we've had on, but all of the people we've had on have all had the same thing in common. They're talented. You're talented, and you're a part of the army of people that put films together that actually get it to where it needs to be for an audience to watch
the
it.
village of
Absolutely.
credits. At the end of a film or any TV series, that village, you've been part of that village.
We're sheltered there.
Or sheltered.
There's a lot of villages.
Yeah.
It's definitely a team effort, and I feel like that's something that some people don't realize when they're getting into filmmaking. They feel like they're just going to be doing like one little niche, and that's true for some people maybe, but I feel like it works much better when you really embrace that brotherhood, sisterhood, that we're all in this little war together, you know what I mean? And trying to make it in a way that is not just good for your department, but also anything that you can do to help any of the other departments and fight the problems together. I think it goes a long way.
It's for the greater good. So that's lovely. What's really interesting is your journey, how you got into this. Would you tell us again the story? It's really interesting.
I've been making a few rounds. Well, I'm originally from Spain. I'm from Madrid in Spain, and I'm 45 years old. So I started doing computer graphics and all that stuff like very, very early on. Like, a combination of things, a combination of I love drawing and I had a very vivid imagination, but I was not good at drawing. I feel like I'm part of that generation where they were still forced kids to write with the right hand, and I feel like I was more like left-handed. But like, so when I was trying to draw or write or whatever, it would look horrible. I always make the joke that I was born with 2 left hands, so I cannot draw to save my life. And then a combination of seeing technology and being fascinated by it. My family did not have. It was not a very affluent family at all. We struggled with money through my whole childhood. That was like a constant. So there was never big technology in my house, So I always had like this kind of reverence every time I was able to see a computer. And we're talking about computers 30, 35 years ago, which it was like this whole thing.
Remember them.
Like I remember that there was this
Big deal.
Friend of us that he was like a programmer on a bank, and he was like, oh my God, he works in NCR. I mean, it's like these kind of things. He writes in what, in COBOL? Oh my God, he programs?
I remember learning that at school.
This fascination, and that's really what I started doing. I started like programming just to make computers do things with like a Sinclair Spectrum computer.
Remember that? Yeah.
Sinclair Spectrum computer. That was the first computer I had for a birthday. I will have to thank all the people that bullied me in school so crazy that made me kind of become more introvert and go home and play with the computer instead of going out and do soccer.
Let's go cheer all those bullies out there.
So,
You
like,
go, bullies.
I hope they're all dead, but I have to thank them because they made me into the man that I am today.
Yes.
No, but it is true. I mean, I didn't live in Madrid city. I mean, I lived like in a village 20-something miles away from Madrid. So, and it was a little town. It was a village in the base of a mountain, really. And it was very little. And there was only one school. And it was definitely not a technological environment.
Right.
You know what I mean? And all the kids were playing soccer. All the people were there. I was this weird kid that liked drawing. Everybody was calling fat, and he liked stories and science fiction, you know. When I started to work with computers and learned and programming, I was able to do things. I started doing graphics very quickly. And that kind of got something on me when I got really into anything that had to do with computer graphics, animation, CG, in a time when there was almost none of it.
Right.
And I always had my idea of if I had been in California, in LA, I mean, when Pixar was starting and all that stuff, that was like the goal, right? I mean, that was like they were starting something, and that was.
Was that really what you were aiming for?
I was definitely looking towards that. You know, I mean,
Okay.
again, my family didn't have any means to send me here, but that was definitely something that it was a motivating force. That was the thing that I wanted to do. You know, but the environment was not helping.
Right.
My mom, as sweet as she is and as supportive as she was throughout my entire career, of course, she wanted me to study something because it's like, well, what's that thing of animation? I don't know. I mean, you are smart. You have to be an engineer. It's like, I don't want, mama.
Yeah.
You know, it's like I like engineering and I like spaceships and all that stuff, but I didn't see myself there. What I said is like, okay, I will finish high school for sure. But then I'm having all these hobbies, and I was starting to make a little bit of money by doing like illustrations for a painter or for an architect or stuff like that, working with 3D Studio Max, before 3D Studio Max, 3D Studio 3. It was like a companion to AutoCAD or something like that. I was like, let me explore this. And right at that time, there was a school that they started the first course for animation. And when I read about it, it kind of got me like the cartoon eyes, like something, because they were using Silicon Graphics. They were using Alias Power Animator. They were using the software that I was reading that they were using for productions here. They were the systems that were used for when they were doing Jurassic Park and when they were doing all of that, right? So I was like, okay, let's do this. Let's try to do that. And when I started that, I was so thrilled to be doing that, and that thrill lasted 4 months because the course was like 9 months. And after 4 months, we were learning the software and learning stuff, because I was there to learn a profession, not to learn how to use the software. Because I've learned that through everything that I've done up until that point had been trial and error by myself. You know, just open the software, get somebody to lend me the software or find a way of getting it, play with it until I'm able to do stuff with it, right? After 4 months, they were like, well, now you work on your short films, and for the next 5 months. And I'm like, I don't want to do a short film. I mean, I want to learn not just about the software, but about the craft, about what involves to make this, what is around animation, what is around computer graphics, what is around storytelling. And that was a very, very, very not a great moment. I was not the only one that was feeling that way. 3 other people were feeling a similar way. So we decided to kind of get together, and maybe instead of doing it here, maybe we can get together, get some money together, buy one of these systems, and learn by doing. Let's start doing stuff. And that's what we did. We got together, we got a little tiny office, we pulled a bunch of money together to get one of these machines that cost like a half of a house, really expensive back in the day. We started doing stuff. And that led to us partnering with an animation studio that were doing traditional animation, and with script writers, we were involved in doing a hybrid CG animation pilot when nobody was doing it. In Spain, even less. But even worldwide, it was not something that was done a lot. And learned through all that process. All of a sudden, I had access to actual animators that were animating in paper. And with the concept of animation, I discovered the book of The Illusion of Life. They had it over there, and that's the first time that I was reading the Illusion of Life and loving every moment of it, you know?
But Juan, who is we? We said we did. Did you have like a team?
Yeah, I mean, like it was me and these three partners that
So
were
three
like
partners.
we were like the CG side, and then the animators were like 12 people, something like that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was like 2 script writers, 12 animators, and 4 of us that were doing the CG side. So we were a crew.
Yeah, that was a crew. Okay.
I was the youngest of them all. I was at 17 at that time. When I opened my first company, I was 17.
Wow.
And I did it not because I had money, because I didn't, not because I was brave, because I wasn't. It's because it was the only option that I saw possible. You know, it was like...
Well, and doing what you loved, right? And what you wanted to
Yeah.
stay in, because you could have gone back to do something else or done something else, but you really wanted to figure this out.
I really wanted to give this a proper shot.
Okay.
You know, and
That's
that
important.
worked until things started to happen between the 4 of us where it felt like we were just not aligned. Like one of them just started doing CG because he was bored. Another one was really there to get money for his family and stuff like that, but he was more interested on the graphical design side of it. And the other guy was just a stoner that he was just there because he was
Fit right in down here.
He had a nice cave that he could stow it out to.
He was a kid he was the typical stoner trust fund kid. You know, like he was like, yeah, I'm here because he's cool. You know, so it was like his
And you
father,
guys are cool.
His
Yeah.
parents had money and they were involved in art, so this was his way of trying to do something and stuff. So, and I was like laser focused on, I freaking want to do Toy Story. You know what I mean? I want to work in Star Wars. I want to do all of that. This is not. So at 21, I decided like it was enough, and it was not as much of momentum that we had at the beginning. It was not really going as fast as I wanted to. So at that point, that's when I went to England. And I was like, well, let's try by myself. I was in England for a little bit.
And why England?
Because to me, it was the closest thing to United
me,
States.
what's wrong with England?
It's
No,
a
I mean,
legitimate
it was English, first of all, which I
Right.
was proficient on. And I was able to, well, I thought I was proficient until I went there and I had to talk with
Newcastle.
people
Of
from
all the
Newcastle.
places, of all the places to go.
It's in Newcastle. I thought I knew how to speak English. Turned out I do, but they don't.
Freddie, you cannot understand their language.
can't?
No, their dialects.
I
are-
went to Scotland after being in Newcastle, and I was able to understand Scottish, like if they were
my
speaking
gosh.
Spanish to me.
Oh, no.
And Newcastle is rough.
I'm about to look this up later.
It's
Yeah.
rough and it's cold. But that was the one option because I had a friend who had basically he was a video game programmer, and they gave him a house to be there on a new on a new job.
Got it.
And he was like, "I'm gonna be by myself. Want to
Got a
tag
place to
along?"
stay.
And I was like, "Sure, I need a break." Also, it was like when you were seeing productions. Yes, you were seeing some. There was a lot of animation happening, for example, in France and other places, but I didn't really speak French. So England felt like
Okay, that made sense.
Mm.
Because my question was going to be,
Closest
why
thing.
not France? Because France had big animation. Okay, but
France
yeah.
has huge animation and they have very artistic animation. For me,
Mm-hmm.
it was a language barrier
Okay, so it's, okay.
because I think they do amazing things.
They do.
over there. And I'm a big fan of a lot of artists over there. It just felt like, out of all the options, felt like it could be the one that worked out. And it was good because it got me to speak English. It got me to like be completely on my own in a different country, deal with all of that. Ended up working in sort of the industry. I mean, it was not exactly animation, which is what I wanted to do, but it was this guy who was doing like a comic book. It was a weekly comic book, and Striker. I don't know if you know Striker.
No.
He was very big in the Sun newspaper.
I do. Actually, no, I do know. How old were you at this time?
21, I moved to England. 2 years later, 23.
Okay, so young.
Something like
Yeah,
23.
yeah, and you were already, I mean, anyway, but
But,
you started young.
But I felt like I was not going fast enough.
Ooh,
All
so
this
you
time,
had really big dreams and you had big aspirations. Okay.
all of this time, I was feeling like I was constantly being derailed because I was not going fast. I was not at the core of where I
interesting.
wanted to be. Everything felt like I had to go to another connect station. You know what I mean? Everything felt like it was like not quite what I wanted to go, but maybe this gets me closer. It felt like that quite a bit on that time. And then after England, after working with this comic, which it was close to animation because it was like instead of doing the animation with all the in-betweens and all the everything, it was just making on the pose, you know what I mean? So it was close. But eventually I became stagnant. I felt This time what I did is I moved back to Spain. I was freelancing for a little bit, and I was like, well, maybe when I was with partners, it didn't work because we all had like different kind of motivations, aimings, etc.
Ideas.
Maybe if I do it by myself, maybe it will work. Plus, I also have more experience. I can partner with some vendors, etc., etc. So that's what I did. I decided to go on my own and started working. The funny thing is that I was still not doing color grading. I was still focused on animation.
You thought you stayed in animation because you thought that was it.
I studied animation because I thought, well, that's where I wanted to be. But there was something that another one of your interviews said. It was called Dawn, which is something like Don Hahn. That
Yes.
it was the first podcast that I listened from your show, and he said something that I've been saying all this time, and I always felt bad for saying it, but that's exactly how I felt. And when I heard him saying it, I felt so validated. I felt so real, because my thing with animation was that I realized that my brain was working better when working with multiple things at the same time, and I was not that great at just being hyper focused on just one thing for hours on end.
It was too linear for you. Yeah.
And he said the same thing, and I felt like if I wanted to, in animation, if I wanted to be where I wanted to be, I had to devote my life to animation. And at that point, there were a lot of other things that were catching my interest, and like I really liked the visual effects side and the spaceship side and the Star Wars side. So eventually, I was like, you know what? Maybe I should steer the course and go that way.
Okay.
And that's where I was when I came back to Spain and opened my studio. By accident, when I was actually supervising VFX for a project, we were having lunch, and there was this guy who was the audio guy, and they told me that they were doing a short film, and they didn't have a colorist for the short film. The production company was giving them the room, which is the big, expensive part with all the gear. Back in the day, it was crazy expensive. But they didn't have colorists to finish the room, and I was like, I can color it. It's like, are you a colorist? And I'm like, yeah. I mean, I'm not, but I've been dealing with picture all my life. You know, I've been dealing with picture, image composition, VFX. You have to do integration. You have to be able to combine things in a way that makes sense. So I understand color. I understand how it works. I have not used that tool specifically, but I've been learning tools all my life. It's just another tool. So we're like, okay, we'll give you. He was in the south. We were in Madrid. He was in Malaga, where Antonio Banderas is from. And
Funny you sound it was like him.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And he was like, we'll put you a plane. Nobody flies in a plane in Spain. I mean, that's something that you Americans do. In Europe, you take a train, or you drive, or you get a bus.
Actually, your roads in Spain are amazing. I once changed the subject, I drove to Spain.
Yeah.
And I hit the motorway. I came over the Pyrenees, and I hit the motorway on a Sunday. It's like I'd rented it for myself. There was no one on the road because it's a religious day. And
we have really good roads.
It was amazing.
It's very easy to go everywhere. So he wanted to be nice and stuff. He's like, no, don't worry. I have a friend. I'll drive with a friend. It's totally fine. It was a 5-hour drive. The reason why I went with a friend is because when my friend was driving, I was reading the manual.
You were learning the tool?
I was learning the software in the drive down.
So this is now fake it till you make it 101.
Oh my God, yes.
No, because
Say yes
I knew I could do it.
Out.
I had confidence that I was able to do it. It was just, I need to know what specific things have this tool and what specific settings it has.
So your brain was already wired to learn on the fly because you could compartmentalize and just, like a computer, figure it out?
Let me put it this way. Imagine you're a cook.
Yep.
You enjoy cooking in your home.
Yep.
You have learned to bake.
Yep.
You have learned to roast. You have learned to do all kinds of things, and then somebody wants to hire you to do sushi. Or maybe sushi is not the right word, but maybe they want to hire you to do some specific salads or some specific roast. You have been cooking for 8 years of your life.
So you're a chef. I'm a chef.
You're a chef. You're just not specialized in that cuisine.
Got it. Okay.
You know what I mean? So in my case, I've been dealing with images. I've been dealing with logarithmic images, linear images, file formats,
It's easier now
channels,
for me. Got it.
Everything.
Okay.
I just don't know what are the specific tools that they use.
I could see you in the passenger seat just flipping pages while your friend is driving.
This thing, I mean, it was like reading the whole thing, and I read the whole thing in the 5 hours that we were driving down, and I sat and color graded the short film. I sat on the room and I did the whole short film in 2 days.
Did you find any difficulty in doing it? No? Okay, so you
read
read the manual.
It felt very natural. In fact, it felt so natural that I was like, hang on a second.
I'm really liking this.
People get paid how much for this?
Good.
It felt good because it also felt like a combination of many things. Like a combination of a little bit of visual effects being a bigger part of the puzzle. Because when you're doing visual effects or when you're doing animation, what they say is like you're doing the tooth of the dinosaur. You know what I mean? But you're not the guy doing the whole thing. It's very difficult. Even as a VFX supervisor, you have a lot of people. But when you're the colorist, you are the guy.
Yep.
And you get not just being the guy, but also you get to talk with the director, with the producer, with the DP.
Yep. You get a lot more exposure to people.
It's not so much for me about exposure. It's about the fact that what I do matters more. You know, like what I like. There's a direct connection, and it's really amazing to be able to meet all of these people and to be able to interact with them in this kind of environment and to be part of their vision and to be part of their dream and to be part of their what they want to do. You know, like one thing that always excited me so much about visual effects is the concept of we have to do something that cannot be done. How do we do it?
Right.
And that tickled my brain like crazy, and I love that. With color grading, it's more about we have this concept. We want to do this flower. How do we make it the best that it can be, and then push it to the world so it can stay as bright as possible, as accurate to the original idea as possible. You know, so it tickled a similar part of my brain. So I started doing it. I started freelancing for a little bit, and that's when I decided that maybe we're steering the thing towards color. So then I'm gonna need the big hardware, the big things, and stuff like that. We go back to I come from a freaking humble family, and I don't have the means.
Right.
How do I do it? And at that time, I started getting into somebody introduced me to this guy that was leaving Kodak when Kodak was already going down. And he was like, well, I'm getting into digital color. I was thinking about getting a machine. Maybe we can get together because I've been working with all the studios. I've been working with all the stuff. I mean, it felt like a match made in heaven because it was like, okay, this guy is going to bring all the people. He already has the contacts. We don't have to be knocking on cold doors.
Right.
It feels like business is coming. Let's do it. So we ordered a machine. The system that I use is called Mystica. It's actually a Spanish development. I've been in contact with the developer since they started, and we have a fantastic relationship. One thing that I love about it is the fact that I can literally talk with the development team and ask them for features, or there's a level of closeness with them that I cannot have with any other software. Plus, it has some features that are really, really, really different and really beneficial from other softwares. And I have to thank him a lot because he helped me through this process. You know, he put together the machine. He was the same guy who sold me my first Silicon graphics. At the point, they were always reselling hardware, but they turned into developers and selling also the hardware. But our relationship goes back since I was 17 years old.
But Juan, can you even take us a step back? Because I don't think a lot of people know what a colorist actually does and how their role affects the output of the film.
Okay. What we do is we try to make things looking seamless, basically.
Okay.
I mean, and then sometimes you give it a style, you give it things. You have to think that cameras don't see the world the same way that we do. Cameras see things in a more linear way. They just capture the light, but that doesn't necessarily have to be appealing. You know, I mean, our eyes work differently. But also is the fact that when you're shooting a movie, as you guys know, it takes days, weeks, months to shoot something. Sometimes you have to shoot a scene in a place, and then you have to wait for somebody to grow a beard and shoot another part or whatever, you know, or just by logistics, you have to do pickups or whatever. The thing is, there are many, many, many things that happen when you're producing a film that could impact the fact that light is not going to look consistent, the sun is going to move, things are going to happen, you know. So the first job is always, let's make this as seamless as possible so it feels like it's all part of the same thing. The main aiming is that try to avoid color or a change in light or a change in sun or a change in whatever to take you out of the fantasy, to take you out of the story.
Okay.
And then you have the artistic side, of course. I mean, you can do the same way that anybody can use Photoshop to fix a photo so it looks okay, or to try to give it something to make it look really punchy and do some cool color with it. It's in a similar way that you can do it on a whole TV show, feature film, or whatever. You don't work frame by frame painting, you know what I mean? I mean, you work usually shot by shot. You can also do full sequences, but usually you work shot by shot, making sure the shots are consistent. You can use a number of tools. The thing with colorists is that you will find colorists that come from very different backgrounds. You have colorists that come from a more artistic background, and maybe they're not so good on technology or not so versed, and they're going more for a more plastic approach, and then they have an assistant that does like the technical thing or making masks or whatever. You have people that come from the editorial world, because at the end of the day, we're working with a timeline, we're working with shots, we're working with a number of things. And you have a few that come from more a technical VFX background like me, you know. Depending on the color, you will approach it differently. But the aiming at the end is the same. You want to make it seamless, you want to make it as beautiful as it can be, and you want to tackle as many issues that they might have had with the shoot as possible. Like sometimes, maybe once they see the shot, they feel like the wall in the back is a bit distracting or it's a bit too bright, so they want to like bring it down a little bit, or they shot it and the face of the actor is a little shadowy. You want to bring the face up a little bit, things like that.
The simplistic thing is it's based on color theory, right, as well, right, where certain colors represent different moods and genres, right? So when the story is being developed, there is that sense of the scene that's being introduced. It's preparing you, your senses to take on what the director wants.
But first you have to fix it.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
That's the thing. I mean, like that's when you talk about color grading, everybody think about color theory and how the colors make you feel and this and that. Yeah, but I cannot see the face.
Yes.
I cannot,
Yes.
you know what I mean? So
Right.
the first thing is making it watchable.
Got it.
Make it watchable, making it that it works. After that, that's the part when you artistically speak with the director, with the DP, with everybody involved, and then it's like, and because it's very rare that it's you as a colorist who is going to introduce those concepts. Usually those concepts have been discussed since the script. I mean, I've had directors that have brought me references from actual, oil pictures, taken from a museum and stuff like that. So like the feel of the scene has to be something similar to this or stuff like that. Every creative person works in different way. And I think part of your job as a colorist is try to create that common artistic language and common actual language, because when someone says contrast, sometimes it does not feel the same as when somebody else says contrast. And then try to achieve that vision. That's when, of course, you can give creative input. I mean, like maybe they have the idea of starting with this warmer color, then we end up cold, and we do this and we do that. Usually they come with that idea, and you kind of guide them through that whole process. But I saw the other day a post, I don't know if it was on Instagram or TikTok or something, like somebody saying like, no, because when you have a composition of color, then you have the 70-20-10 rule or the 60-30-10 rule, because you have 60%. And I had to push like, dude, no colorist in the planet works like that. But it was one of these guys saying like, that's how colorists do it. And they're like, no, we don't. No, we don't.
Well, it goes back
That's how
to-
set design do it, probably. I mean, when they're
Right, 'cause
framing the
it's
shot.
It's fixed, right?
I mean, they already have that concept when they're building it. And when you have set design, you have a lot of artists involved on making a movie. We come at the end of the process, but me personally, I mean, and some other colorists I know they do too. I mean, I like to be involved as early in the process as possible, because I think it's helpful for everybody, and we can
to know
get
what's
into
going
all of
on.
this.
Right.
When you're watching, like say, I'm in an audience, I'm watching a film. Do you use color? The how the film looks is based on the story of the film. So sometimes you'll watch a film, for argument's sake, that's like a film that's based in the desert, or it's based in, like say somewhere that's hot, like dusty. And it looks quite washed out. The picture looks quite. There's color in it, but there's a low level. It's not rich color. Whereas you watch something like, I don't know, Bad Boys 2, and it's such it's taken in Miami. There's rich colors in there, and it makes a big difference. Is that part of what you do?
Yes, that's exactly what I do.
Right.
Because both of those pictures could have been done the opposite way.
Right.
I mean, you can have a very desaturated image that can be made to look very saturated, very rich, and the opposite. At the same time, if you're in an environment like you're in a desert, and you're in an environment, and you're in the desert in the middle of a dust storm when you don't see the sky, you might be in a desert and you might not have color to pull from. Because I mean, of course, I have to pull from what's on the picture.
Right.
Yes.
You can introduce some colors yourself, but that usually does not work very well unless you're doing it in a very specific way. So you need some base to be able to work.
Sure.
But if you're, for example, in the desert and you have a blue sky and then you have a little tree over there that you want to get to, then you can just blast that desert, be like orange, fantastic color with the blue and this green tree. I mean, you can
Sure.
do that, or that's a point where you can have both options. What direction? What does the movie need? What
Yes.
does your movie
Sure.
feel like?
Understand,
What do
understand.
you want to?
So another question. So that's a natural scene. But when you throw in, say, special effects, so that you take a Marvel film for argument's sake, that might be filmed outside, but the majority of the picture is CG. Does it make it more complicated trying to take a computer-generated image and matching it with real life?
A big visual effects movie, it has a lot of very talented artists working on it.
Sure.
And usually when you get the shots, they have already been balanced. In fact, most of them, they also have colorists working internally
Right.
to make sure everything is balanced correctly and it feels like what it's supposed to feel. So most of the time when you just put the show light on it and you just look at it and it looks pretty much in the spot, and you barely have to do anything to it.
Sure.
The problem is usually when you're working with productions that are not Marvel, that are not Star Wars,
Exactly.
that are not, that are smaller and they have other VFX and maybe they shoot a green screen however they cool, and then when they integrate it, it doesn't match. That's one of those situations where because of my VFX background, I like to work with the VFX houses and say like, no, I mean, maybe instead of just doing the green screen, let me see, maybe give me layers, or maybe let me do a pre-pass as color before you do the green screen so we can integrate it a bit better, et cetera, et cetera. So there are ways of helping that.
Right.
But you have to have that into account because, of course, if you shoot something in a blue screen and you have lit it like it's midday and then the background is foggy, it's
Yeah.
never going to
It's
look
never
right.
gonna be
Doesn't
the
matter.
same.
That does not depend on your integration. It's
and-
just the light does not match.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of people don't understand that when they see a movie and scenes pulled together, they think that's what the camera captured. It's not.
It's never.
It's never what the camera captured. And your job is to ensure like whatever mood, all the things, the graininess, whatever it's supposed to evoke, that then you do your magic, right? And technical magic as well, to get it across that the mood, that the scene is believable
Yeah.
and is pulling you into that mood.
So when you were at Paramount or Lucasfilm, was you involved in it? Did you get involved?
No. I would always, no, I couldn't even speak the technical language. I wish, but I would, occasionally go, I'm just here to watch. And, and they would let me. I would always ask if I could watch because it fascinated me. The level of detail that they go in and how they pull everything apart. I don't think as moviegoers, they don't realize the work it takes just to even just do a scene.
It's a lot of work.
There's a lot
Leaning
of work.
onto that, to your right, there's a little board.
It's really small.
It's really, really
small
small with some
little
pegs.
whiteboard.
Would
whiteboard.
you draw out for us
Yeah. I mean,
in very simple terms?
like things that have to do with color.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, like I can show, for example, one thing that people don't, or at least get confused with often, is like when they're dealing with, a lot of people are using terms like a logarithmic image or LUT or things like that, and people know that when you're looking at a log image, it looks more desaturated, it looks softer, but they don't know why are we working like that.
Sure.
I guess that's the question. And what I was drawing, as you can see, the shadow is already pre-drawn. But what I was drawing before is like, if you have a chart like that, for example, and this is,
X and Y axis.
yep, this is 0, and this is amount of actual light, and this is the light that you're encoding on the file. Like this will be black, this will be pure white.
Okay.
This will be black, pure white. So a linear camera or something that just sees image plainly will go like this. It will be a straight line. Imagine that this is a straight,
Yeah.
well, 45-degree angle
Yes.
line.
You mean that's not correct? You mean
Ah,
that's not correct?
It's not completely accurate, no. Drawn in an angle like
No.
So, but my point is that white encoded, it's white in real life, So
Right.
these values are correlation between these values. So when you're seeing a logarithmic image, that's something that Kodak invented when they were developing a format called Cineon to be able to store digitally film. And the thing is, the eyes are that's a physical thing. I mean, they're much more sensitive to changes in low light, in shadows, than they are to highlights. Meaning that it would be nice if we could use more of that data, because at the end of the day, the data is finite. I mean, there's only so much data. On an 8-bit image, for example, I'm going to try to do an 8, you have 256 possible values of every channel, 256 because it's 2 to the power of 8. Now, Cineon was 10-bit, meaning that you have times 2, so 1024. What does that mean? If you don't have that many values, you can have what's called banding, meaning when you expand the image, it's like you see the steps. It's not a smooth gradient.
And when you see that, a lot of times when you're streaming films as well, streaming, because the bits have to go through that little skinny
because you
little
have to reduce it. A lot of that
It's
software
compressed.
It's compressed, but it's compressed in ways to save a lot of bandwidth, and they have to take a lot of shortcuts. In this case, we're talking about acquisition. So what Kodak did was a curve that looks a little bit like that. Maybe not so down, but the point of this is that you can encode up to like around a third of it. I mean, you can encode most of the shadow information. You see, like we have only made it like a maybe 10%, but we have already used like a third of our whole
of what's available.
data budget. And then less data for this. I mean, we're up to past half, and then for the highlights, we're just this little part. So that reflects better what the human eye can see. So when you're looking at an image that looks washed out, that's usually what we work from.
Right.
Because we want to have as much latitude and as much information as possible to start our work. Imagine if we had very little information, then things will start breaking apart very quickly.
Right.
Now with HDR and Dolby, for example,
high dynamic range.
With Cineon, we tackled the problem of lack of information on the shadows. With HDR, now we're tackling the problem of lack of information on the highlights. Like up until now, a lot of movies, when they had like a window, it would do a blown out window. You don't see what's outside. Either you see the interior or the exterior, not both. Now with HDR, you can see both. So it's like first we dealt with let's make something that looks appealing, that sees similar to the way humans see. But now with HDR, it's the way humans see in real life, because your eyes adapt. You can go outside and you see outside, or you can see outside of a window. So that curve, the new curve is called PQ, or perceptual quantifier, or something like that. It's similar to the Cineon curve. It's a little bit different. It goes like more steep at the end, and it can encode all of those values beyond just taking care of the shadows, but also all the different highlights.
So if you think about, you take a streaming service that will take a file, compress it, send it, and you're watching it in HDR. So you're watching on an HDR TV.
Yeah.
So is that then reconverting what's lost back onto the screen? So
not exactly. We're talking about different types of compressions. It's not the same talking about latitude and compression. Latitude is how many values do you have to store information.
Fine.
That's the bits. It's 8 bits, 10 bits, 12 bits, 16 bits, similar to audio. Okay.
Yep.
Compression is what artifact, what technology, that's H.264, MPEG-4, all that stuff, are you using to get rid of data as much as possible so you can make the file smaller.
Yeah.
So compression doesn't necessarily affect the latitude. You can have all those values all the way through. The problem is that what you're going to lose is the fine details, the grain, the subtleties. That's going to be taken out by the compression to save bandwidth.
Right.
Yeah.
So but then if you're using a compressor that is 8-bit for an HDR channel, that's when you're going to lose bandwidth. It's not because of the compression, it's because of the latitude.
Okay.
You lost possible values.
So this might sound like a stupid question, but are movies filmed in HDR? Do they film it that way, or is it the?
It's not a stupid question. It's a loaded question.
Yes, it's a controversial question.
It's not, because the thing is, the way you're shooting movies has not changed.
Right.
Yeah.
They're not shooting HDR. I mean, when you're shooting movies, you always try to contain all the information within there so you can have options. The thing about HDR is not about the acquisition; it's about the delivery.
Yeah.
It's about standardizing your televisions and your theaters and all that stuff, so they can now show those values that usually you will just compress and hide.
Right.
Yeah.
But you usually always want your picture to be not cut on the shadows and not cut on the highlights. You want to have as much as possible. That's where the logarithmic curves come to help. That most of the cameras like Red, Sony, Alexa, all of those try to
get as much.
compress those 14, 15, whatever number of stops they claim to have into that file, so you as a colorist have access to all of that information.
Right.
If you use it or not, that depends on the project, the deliverables,
That's the
etc.
artistic, obviously, viewpoint as well.
Because that's the thing. I mean, like if you were trying to put all of those values and show all of those values in a regular SDR, in a regular image, the images will not feel as bright.
Right.
It will feel like it's losing a little bit of information. It will look like some of the old HDR images. You know, when people was doing multi-exposure and
Yes.
doing like a combining them all, and then it looks cool, but it looks weird. It does not look natural. What HDR does is that it works better. It works more like our eyes.
Right.
You know, where they can adapt.
And I think that's it. And I think for us, for the average person that's watching a film or any content, when things don't look right, they're not right? Because
right.
our eyes just naturally try to adjust, but our eyes already knows, and this is subconsciously, like, that looks off. And if that looks off, it takes you away from the story.
That is true.
And you're actually missing, right, data and bits to be drawn in. And you don't want to be off. You want to be pulled in, and that's your job, right? You have to be pulled into the shots, into the scenes, so they are immersed 100%
Absolutely.
in the
And
story.
I mean, do you think that the advent of HD and 4K has made your job easier, or
No.
was it?
No, it's one more deliverable. I mean,
And that's another thing, yeah.
it's not for me. 2K. I mean, the whole thing with 2K, 4K, and stuff. At the end of the day, is more pixels. Most of the cameras were able to shoot in high resolution anyway.
Sure.
But it just turns into now you need more storage. Now you need another deliverable. You do the SDR deliverable. You do the HDR. What are the specs, etc., etc. It doesn't really make my job easier. I just have something else that I have to output.
Yeah.
But that's the way it goes with anything. You know, like it's like when you're doing a mix and you have to do a 5.1 mix and an Atmos mix. Does Atmos make your job easier? Usually not. Usually it complicates it a little bit because now you have more options.
Yes.
And I think it's a little bit the same with
Sure.
HDR. Now I have to do the regular color pass that I usually do, and then I have to do the HDR pass. Which in my case, for example, I usually like to do the regular pass first and then the HDR, which is the opposite of what Dolby recommend you to do. It has worked way better for me on so many shows. We started doing HDR in 2018, very, very early. And at the end, I mean, they have kind of admitted that, actually that kind of makes sense.
Juan, and now that because now you're doing your own, right? So you first started off by saying you were working with others, then you moved over here. So now you have your own proper production company. And what's the name of your company?
LightBenders.
Where did LightBenders come from?
Where did that LightBenders come from? Well, the company that I have that I had in Spain, it was called Film Bakers.
Oh.
It kind of is like an upgrade of that.
Okay.
But then on the story that I was telling before, when I was about to get partnered with this Kodak guy and stuff, that ended up going to hell. I mean, the guy told me the day that they were installing the machine, he told me that he was bankrupt and it was this whole ordeal. So fast forward, ended up not partnering with him, just by myself. We were very successful in Spain, but I still felt like I was still looking at Los Angeles, at California and stuff. And when 3D movies started, when the big boom of 3D movies started, Mystica, which is the software that I use, was one of the key softwares that was doing 3D. It was like two softwares that were the top of the world at that point, and one of them was Mystica. So that gave me the possibility of coming here to the US and working with Bad Robot, working with Paramount, and working with huge projects like finally working Star Wars.
You're doing your
finally working Star Wars.
Your Toy Story.
Finally working Star Trek. To me, it was absolutely.
Your dream came true then at that point because you were working toward it early on in your career.
To me, it was absolutely incredible, and that gave me a very unique perspective on being able to work on these massive projects, but from the studio side.
Right.
You know? Because at first you think, okay, now I'm coming to the US, I'm gonna do all of these movies, then I'm gonna go to work on one of these big facilities, and that's gonna be it. You know what I mean? But working from the studio side allowed me to see that working with these facilities is not always what you feel it is, and that there were a lot of things. For example, about Robot, we built a team internally that we were doing a lot of the post-production side of the movie, and that was amazing. And the level of communication between us, the level of integration between effects and audio and editorial and color and everything happening at the same time and all moving like one, that to me was last part of the blueprint that I was missing. As like that's the way I wanted to work, and showing me that it can be done. And also working with JJ, it was absolutely fantastic, and I loved every minute of it, even though it was super demanding.
That's JJ Abrams.
He's
I'm just saying his name so our listeners know.
Yeah,
it's JJ.
Yeah. He's super sweet. I don't know how old he is now, but he's still 14 years old. You know what I mean? He's like a kid having fun, and he's
but that shows in his films.
He's so knowledgeable and such passionate and such a fan of the things that he makes, and I think it's a real pleasure to work with him, and it was fantastic to have that experience. After Star Wars Force Awakens, that's when I was like, okay, so what am I going to do with my life now? I mean, I'm out of Bad Robot right now because we were done with the movie and there were like plans to, let's see what happens. The original plan was only to do that one. And that's when I decided to open my studio, to open LightBenders, because I was like, I don't really see myself going into one of the big facilities because I feel like I'm going to be constrained. I feel like I saw a lot of inefficiency on those big places. I saw a lot of things not done the way we were doing things,
Right.
a lot of roadblocks on those places. I feel like in the old days when color and image had to do with labs and stuff, everybody was, of course, I mean, it was big. Nobody could do that at their house, so you were at the mercy of the labs, and that's fine, that worked out. But when the digital thing happened, I feel like some of these labs wanted to keep that control, so they started like scaring people, like, oh, nobody knows how to do digital, we have to keep this. Now times are different. Now the software is available, the machines are available, monitoring is available. It's not, the hardware is not the limitation anymore. And there are many studios, many medium-sized studios. I don't say go to work with a guy who's grading out of a TV and coloring on his bedroom, but there are a lot of middle studios that are doing really amazing jobs, really amazing work. And I think it was a very good moment. I was like, let's open my own place and let's try to do. Basically, the main idea of LightBenders is let's do what we were doing at Bad Robot, but as a service for other clients.
For others.
So, a couple of questions for you as time is moving on.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, sorry, I don't.
no, not at all. We're enjoying
That just
it.
means we need to have you back. That's what that means.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I still have to talk about all my childhood
I
trauma
know.
and all that stuff. And all
We've
my
got a couch for you to lie down for
my
that
whole
one.
immigration process.
Yes, oh my
that
God.
was horrible.
That comes through your work, though. That's a level of detail that comes through your work.
What are you most proud of that you've worked
Yes.
on?
Oh, I was going to ask that question.
I'm very proud of Star Trek Into Darkness.
Oh, great film.
I'm very proud of what we did, how we did it, and
Oh, I'm
because
glad you say that. I
yeah.
enjoyed it.
I really loved that movie, and I was not the final colorist on that movie because that movie, the final color went to Company 3, but I was the one who put it together. I was the DI supervisor. I was the one that was doing all the internal color reviews, all the internal temp coloring and all that stuff at Bad Robot, plus the stereo, plus the 3D, plus supervising all the deliverables. That was the first movie where I did what I felt I was capable of doing when I was growing up.
So you gave it your all.
I mean, I gave it my all 100 hours a week for
Wow.
months and 120 hours a week the last couple of weeks.
Oh, you didn't sleep.
Barely. It was brutal.
Yeah.
But as brutal as it was, I have it on a very special part of my heart. And then as something that I have done outside of a robot and with my company, I'm very proud of all the work that I have done with a director called Ben Kitai, because we have done like 8 projects together. We did a TV show called Startup. Everything that I've done with him has always been such an amazing experience of like because he likes to work with me the way I am, as in we start very early in the process. It's not like last minute call, I called you. No, we start working very early in the process. Sometimes have been on set with him. It's the way I really like to work, and I'm very proud of the work that we did on those TV shows. We were one of the first shows to be very early delivering 4K. We were very early delivering HDR when there was not even a standard. Dolby Vision was not still a thing. There were a lot of challenges with those things, and they came out really
You know, you just raised a really good point, and I heard this theme early on when you were saying, well, I want to get involved.
Mm-hmm.
I think oftentimes when creative teams are working, especially in bigger organizations, no, you don't get a preview of it. Mm-hmm. You actually get it, and here it is, and then once you're done, bring it back to us. Mm-hmm. But getting involved early on, you start already road mapping things. You can actually even give advice and start directing things. Because look, at the end of the day, if you sign up for the vision, which is everyone's here to work on this TV series or film and make it the best it can be, you can give your creative input can actually help and alleviate problems and steps that you would have to take and clean up. You're actually doing both at the same time. And so when you incubate that level of thinking, those people like to work with people that think that same way, because you're actually problem solving as you're moving forward.
100% problem solving, and not just for yourself,
right?
For some of the other departments.
Exactly.
I cannot tell you how many times we have been maybe on a review or something, and then see a shot that is maybe a boom mic or have to happen, or being an editorial review and something is a split screen or something like that, and they're like, oh, we have to send this to VFX and stuff, and I will be like, no, we can take care of that. But you do color. Like,
Exactly.
yeah,
There you
but
go.
that
That's a
doesn't
great
matter. I mean,
point, Juan.
that's easy. I know how to do it. It's super quick. You don't have to send that to VFX. Don't worry about that. I've had clients that have been doing logo changes, like they were not sure on where to place their the logo of their show within the shot, and they were like, well, we'll do it in the color grading session. But can we do that? Sure. Why not? The problem is that on some of the other big places that have a more of a factory approach,
Right.
they don't have that flexibility. And you have an edit change, you have to wait until one of the online department
Exactly.
is available. I've done edit changes within the color session, not a problem. It's totally fine. It's totally doable. It's just that, and I feel like a lot of projects need that flexibility
Yes.
and benefit from that flexibility versus the rigidity of the
Right.
factory approach.
Right. When I would see that's the attractive part of your services is that you can think that way. And it also says a lot about your talents, right? You can actually play that role to help alleviate some of the pain points that will happen later on, and that which turns into being costly and more time consuming, right? And as you know, this industry is like, I wanted it yesterday.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it helps alleviate all of that and makes it easier for everybody else. And at the same time, it's nice to feel involved with a project.
Yeah.
You know, if you're just in a factory, just pulling a crank, just
Putting the stamp
doing
on.
bolts, it's like you don't care about the bolt. You
don't.
care. But when you do maybe less projects and you really get involved in them, it's a different feeling.
Yeah.
It's been amazing talking to you. It really has. And you're right. We just scratched
The surface.
The surface here. There's a lot more to discuss, and we will come back. We'll have you back another point if you'll.
That'd be awesome.
Right.
Great, lovely. So at this point in the show, there's two things we'd like to do. There are some cards in a box, quite deep, meaningful questions.
Okay.
If you would pick anyone out, if you wouldn't mind, read it, answer it yourself,
Okay.
and then Norma and I will take turns to answer as well.
Wait,
Say a
we
number
pulled
one-
a whole bunch of cards.
1
Okay.
to 6, 7.
Wait.
Nice. So that means 1 because it turns around.
Yeah. 1.
Let's see the card. What's your go-to strategy for achieving your goals?
Oh. Go-to strategy for achieving your goals. And you can interpret this question however you want. So,
What's my go-to strategy to achieving my goals? Other than crying, right?
because there's too many.
Other than curling and crying. I don't know. I feel like it's try to look at the problem from as many angles as possible.
Ooh, that's a good one. I
You know,
like
because
that.
there's always multiple ways of approaching something. The fact that everybody is doing one thing doesn't mean that it has to be that way.
Yes.
Look at that way, because if a lot of people is doing it, there might be a reason behind it.
Right.
But it's like the anecdote where why are the trains or the rail tracks the distance that they are? And then to make the story short, basically comes down to the width of 2 horses' butts. Because that's what the Romans made their roads based on.
Really? Is
of
that-
having
is that
2
the-
horses in front of the
is that
car.
the
And they needed
explanation?
that much.
Oh my God.
You know what I mean?
There you go. Learn something new today.
You know what I
Yeah,
mean? So
I
it's
like
like sometimes things are done in a way because back in the day were done in certain way for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And more often than not, people forget the reason why something was done.
Right.
I feel like trying to understand whatever you're doing, try to understand what's the reason behind it,
Okay.
and trying to see multiple options to go to that,
I
to
like
get to
it.
that
I like
point.
it.
How about you?
Okay, I'm going to answer it a little different in that my go-to is like, what instinctually do you go to? What are your instincts, my go-to, to achieving your goals? And I'm going to say it's listen to your own voice, the deep, deep voice. Because oftentimes you run into obstacles, you run into people saying, or, some other variable will come into play. But, and I've said this a few times, but your intuition, does it feel right? Should I do it? Should I take a risk? Right? Is really, for me, is my go-to. It's where I go to move things forward and to achieve. When I take too many other variables, well, it's supposed to be like this, or I read this, or the process should actually be these 5 steps. And sometimes if you can tell yourself, you know what? No. Remember, you can actually bend time. You can actually, your own little superpowers, or you have a contact, or just throw it out to the universe. Wake up in the morning, go to sleep saying, universe, help me with this problem. and I'm going to wake up and a solution will come magically happen. Yeah, so that's like my little go-to.
That. No.
What is yours?
My go-to one is belief. You know, is believing in your goal, believing you can do it.
Yeah, that's
so I've got to have belief in it. Secondly, it's going to be is the drive to push myself forward. You need. I feel, for me anyway, to if I set myself a goal to do something, I will push myself until I do it. I'm not going to turn around and say like I'm going to be a pilot, a fighter pilot. It's never going to happen. The goals I try and set myself are goals. They're out there. They're well at the edge of my stretch, but they're achievable. Okay. And that's what I'll aim for, and I'll go for it, and I will push and push and push until I get to where I want to get to.
Right. So one last thing, Juan. We always like to end our segments with advice. Is there any advice or words of wisdom, or what would you tell yourself, for our listeners who are listening, right? What could you share from the journey that you've been on thus far that would be helpful for others to know?
I will say, I think that the trust in yourself is definitely something important, but also don't be afraid to be different, and that sometimes the truth is that if there's sometimes in your life you are not valued in a place because you're not in the right place. And sometimes it's about changing the place where you are, or the environment that you are, or the people that you're with something that can appreciate your value in a different way. Because like, same as when I was in Spain, I was the weird guy who's trying to do things in an industry that was not really there. When I came here, all of a sudden I was one of the top 5 people in the planet doing something. And that's the same person. You know what I mean? So it changes a lot depending on the environment that you're on and depending of what you're around. So I would say just keep doing stuff, and what I said before, like try to look at the thing from different points of view and try to understand why things are being done and what can you do to improve them, because there is usually always room for improvement or finding your way of doing it.
Right. Great.
Lovely.
Oh, Juan, thank you
so much
for your time. we were in harmony there. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
But we need to have you back because I do want to hear those other stories.
Oh, I have so many stories.
I know, you have so many stories. Yes.
I was like, just try to focus. I didn't know how far back you wanted to go, and I ended up going too slow. Sorry.
No.
No, so it was lovely. Honestly, it was a real learning curve.
And your T-shirt, can you just read what it says?
It says, "I am a colorist. I solve problems you don't know you have in ways you cannot understand."
Yes.
Love it.
Yes. Oh, well, lovely. Well, thank you again, and we'll have you back.
That'll be amazing.
Thank you.
Guys.
And cut.
Thank you for tuning in to Energist Podcast, where ambition meets achievement. If today's stories energized you, share this episode with someone who needs that spark. Stay connected. Subscribe to our newsletter at NRJMediaGroup.com and follow us on social media for more powerful insights. Until next time, stay inspired, stay bold, and keep striving for greatness.
Energist Podcast is produced and hosted by Norma Garcia and Rich Reed. The incredible talent behind us. We are highly engineered and edited by Rich Evers. Our seriously creative director is none other than David H. Tanaka. Our talented music composer is Steve Devaney. Our devotion to motion graphic designer is Mike Macklin. Our very spirited technical advisor is Tracy Williams. Our amazing marketing manager, Lauren Carter. Our man of many words publicist is Josh Gershman. And introducing our producer's assistant, Blake Mealy. Energist Podcast is brought to you by NRJ Media Group.